Hey everyone, welcome to the Seeds of Success podcast, hosted by Dottie San Martin and myself, Orly Rivera. This show is your weekly dose of knowledge, insights, and actionable tips to transform centers into striking successes. Whether you're a seasoned industry professional or just stepping onto the lanes, we've got you covered. So Dottie, I was thinking the other day, friction. I know me and you talked about this, and friction in the workplace and friction in businesses, whether it's a bowling center or any kind of business. Are you causing friction? Are you stirring up these customers? And people are probably wondering right now what we are talking about. But I know you have some stories, and this one we might cause some friction during this show because there's some we're gonna get fired up doing it. So I'm gonna let you kind of take it from here and kind of explain a little bit more what friction can mean in the workplace.
Yes, thank you, Orly. It's good to be here today. This is a topic that is so important. Friction can really set the tone for an experience. And a lot of times what happens is there's friction points, and those friction points become a negative for your business, and it causes people to not to want to come back, or it turns somebody walking through your doors that's all happy and looking forward to having fun at your place to all of a sudden walking away and being upset or being frustrated. So we want to talk a little bit about some of those points of friction and how they can be avoided, and just to bring them out and say, hey, look at your center, because is this a friction point in your center? And you and I are both very big into social media and leveraging social media to grow your business. But I can tell you, if you have friction points in your center and your customers are leaving your center and they're frustrated because they had a speed bump in their journey, those are the things that are going to make it to social media fastest. Right?
Yeah.
People are going to walk out of there going, you will never believe what happened to me at XYZ. And that is not what you want.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about some of those friction points that you might have in your center or your business that you might not be aware of. And we want to talk a little bit about how that can have a negative impact on your growth.
Yeah. The friction can start as soon as you walk in those. Technically it could probably start in the parking lot, but once you get through those doors, friction could start, something could cause something even before they even speak to someone. I know I've gone into like a restaurant and you're kind of looking like, where's the, where do we start? Where do we go? Nobody's coming up here. And just from those few first seconds, I could be frustrated and be like, I'm out of here. I can't even find somebody to help us. Or, if you're not seeing a sign, there's a lot of things you could do. Like I said, just walking in those doors, friction can be caused, and it could already make the whole experience bad. And
right. Yes, especially like when you're going into a restaurant and you're hungry and you're ready to get served and you're like, is anybody going to take care of me?
Yeah, no, it's a big deal to have either, you walk into some restaurants and you see the sign that says, please wait to be seated. That's always the great thing because, okay, I need to wait to be seated. But there's also friction can be caused there even with the sign. I've walked into a place before where it says, wait to be seated. You wait and nobody's coming out. And you're looking around like, okay, where, is somebody here? I had this happen the other day. I was at a restaurant. We're standing there. And I'm looking around like, okay, is somebody going to help us? It wasn't busy. So I'm like, and then somebody from across the bar yells, oh, you can go sit anywhere on that side. Yeah. And then what kind of made it interesting too is they followed us kind of over there, gave us a couple menus. And then I never saw that person again. So I don't know if they were possibly the hostess, but they were sitting down at the bar. So that's already kind of a bad look.
Yeah. And that arrival and check-in process, that's so crucial to handle it the right way and make sure that there's no friction points, because that's setting the tone for the rest of that event. So it shows up in places like a long line and it's not clear of the wait times, or maybe you don't know the process. Maybe you don't know, okay, well, there's a line here and a line here. Where do I stand in line? I just want to get served, right? I just want to get a lane. And guests don't know where to go, who to talk to, or what happens next. That starts that journey on a negative note. It's a friction point. And then maybe they're looking up and they don't understand how you offer the experience. Maybe they don't understand the pricing. Maybe they don't see the pricing. Maybe they don't know what's next for them. Maybe they don't know the rules of signing in for a reservation. If you're leading them to a kiosk, is that kiosk marked clearly? Check in for your reservation here. All of those things go into creating anxiety for the customer. That, you know, it's confusion, and a lot of it boils down to communication and making sure that you are very clear in communications and you're setting that journey in place on a positive instead of a negative note. So that's one point from the arrival.
Yeah, I was going to point out one more example of that is I've been to places before where you see one line, like you said, and then there's another line, and then all the customers are confused. I'm like, oh, are you waiting for this? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just stood here. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll stand here, I guess.
Yes, for sure. You need to be clear with the communication. Another point of friction in bowling centers, most especially, is lane readiness and technical disruptions. You know, maybe it's a delay of getting on the lanes. Maybe a customer walks in and they see 10 lanes open, but yet you say there's a waiting list. Well, perhaps those lanes are waiting for a reservation to come in. Well, your customer doesn't know that. That becomes a friction point. So I know we've got monitor ads that you can actually put up there now that says this lane is, you know, reserved for a group coming in. That is communicating to that customer that, yes, this lane is available, but we have a group getting ready to, you know, use those lanes. And we all know that we are in a business that there is technology being used, there's machines that are being used, and things are going to go wrong from time to time, right? It's inevitable.
Yeah.
But the customer that experience disrupts their journey. So the fact that it happens, you know, it's going to happen, but it's how you handle that afterwards. You've got to be able to communicate clearly. You've got to let them know, you know, what the process is. You've got to keep them in the loop. If the machine is needing to be recycled or whatever, let them know. Keep them in the loop of what's going on so that they now don't have that as a negative. Try to turn it around to a positive. They don't want to have to be troubleshooting when they come. They're coming there to have fun, right?
Yeah.
So make sure that you are aware of that as well.
Yeah, and just the way you let them know, that goes a long way of how you're saying. If you're just like, hey, we've been having problems on this machine all day. Sorry if it messes up again. That doesn't sound the best. You could say something like, hey, you know what? There has been a little bit of issues on this machine. Hopefully nothing goes wrong with it. But if it happens to, you know, we'll be right over here to help you out. We'll take care of you. You know, we'll make sure the experience is going to be good for you. If you let them know in a night, because if you just hear, hey, we've kind of had problems with this, so keep an eye on it, you're going to be like, oh gosh, here we go. Like from the beginning, you're going to have this bad, you know, this negative vibe. So make sure you're kind of wording it correctly.
And the other thing that really should be done is you should set the expectations with your employees that they're constantly monitoring the customers and looking around at what's going on. And they need to be proactive. They need to not wait until there's a problem. They need to anticipate where there could be a friction point, where there could be a problem, and change that right away. So, you know, that's another area that you can work on as well. A third point of friction is food and beverage ordering. Are your guests leaving the lanes to order their food? Are they having to get up from having fun and walk up to your restaurant area and place their order? Sometimes those lines are long. Sometimes it takes longer than others. Are you disrupting their fun?
Yeah, I think another thing that pops into my head when it comes to ordering food, if there is going to be a long wait, make sure you kind of give them the heads up. Hey, it's going to be out in a little bit. I'll keep you updated. Go down to the lanes every once in a while. Hey, you know, just to let you know your burger's almost up, because if not, they're kind of looking around and they're wondering, is this food almost done? So yeah, I think as long as you're keeping them updated and letting them know, it's going to keep them happy. So
yes, I completely agree with that, Orly. So those are just a few, and you know, now there are, like, for example, our newest scoring system, customers can actually order the food right down on the lane, so they don't have to disrupt their food. So look at where you have opportunities within your center to be able to do something to avoid, you know, the customer being frustrated, or maybe just choosing to not order the food because, gosh, I'm not going to go get up and wait in line. It's too long. So you don't want to miss those opportunities for additional food and beverage sales. So definitely take a look at that. So, you know, there's also something else that's not, you know, it's often overlooked, but it is a friction point, and that is the behavior of your employees.
Yeah.
So how are you being greeted when you come in? Are you being told, no, you can't do this? No, you can't do that? How are you being? To me, that is a friction point. Some people might not think of it as a friction point, but I definitely think it is a friction point. When you walk in, you expect to be greeted with kindness, with a smile. You want that to be a very first positive interaction and not a friction point. So I encourage you to take a look at the people that you have on your front line and make sure that they themselves are not the friction point.
Yeah. And like we just had a show recently about, are you tone deaf? Just the way you say things. That's very important. I've walked into restaurants before and they say, as soon as I like that they tell me how long the wait's going to be, but there's a certain way to say it. I've walked into a restaurant before and I said, hey, we need a table for 4. And they say, well, just a heads up, it's going to be at least 45 minutes. Do you just still want to wait? And I'm like, I guess not now, because you pretty much made me seem like I shouldn't want to wait. So yeah, I think that comes into play too.
Yes, I completely agree with that, Orly. There are so many opportunities for you to take a look at what you've got going on and make sure that you are, looking at where those friction points are and really evaluating them. Where can I do better? The last friction point, number 5, that I want to bring out today is when customers are, when the exit ends suddenly. So are you clear with when their lane time is over? Is their lane just turning off? Is anybody saying, thank you, come back to see us? Anything like that at the end of the experience? Are they unclear of what the next step is? If it's a reservation, do they know what to do after that? So communication is what it really all boils down to. And I think that when you're clearer with your communication, that sets a tone for a more positive experience.
Yeah. And if your center's not super busy, one thing I used to do was I would go down and let them know, hey, just a heads up, you have about 7 minutes left. Are you guys looking to extend your play? We could get that taken care of. Because if not, if somebody just sees their time expire and you haven't gone down to talk with them, they might already start putting their shoes on, where if you go down and let them know, hey, it's about to expire, they might say, oh yeah, I didn't know that was an option that we could stay on. I thought somebody else was waiting on this lane or something. So that's that clear communication is very important.
Yes, absolutely it is. So I'm going to go through just one more time because we covered a lot of territory here. I just kind of want to go through these points. I want to recap what they are, and then I'm going to leave you with a challenge. So obviously our first friction point that we've identified that we think everybody should be aware of is that arrival and check-in. Is there confusion related to that? The lane readiness and any technical disruptions. Be aware of that. That's obviously a great place for friction. Food and beverage ordering interruptions. Be aware of that. Your employee behavior. Is that a friction point for your guests that are coming into your center? And the exit that ends too suddenly. Does the customer know what the next steps are for them? So these friction points all need to just be identified. Take just a few minutes and take a look after this podcast at your center. Evaluate it. Where are your friction points? And identify, what could I do better? What can I do to make sure that these are not friction points going forward? Because like we said earlier, Orly, the friction points become your hottest social media engagement with your customers, because they're going to go out and they're going to spread that first. So you want to make sure that you're leaving, your customers are leaving, and they are leaving your center happy. They're leaving, certainly not like you did the other day when you placed an order. You left the drive-through more frustrated than you entered it with, and that's not the experience that you want your customers to have. So anyway, take a look. You may find other friction points in your center, but take some time out and walk through your center, talk with your employees and ask them what they think the friction points are in your business. So, Orly, this has been a really good podcast. I hope that our listeners get something out of it and they will go out and look at where their friction points are today. So, listeners, thank you so much for being a part of today's episode of Seeds of Success. With decades of industry experience, we are honored to share ideas, strategies, and trends designed to help entertainment centers like yours thrive and grow. Together, we're planting the seeds for a stronger, more successful future. Share this podcast with your team and industry friends because the more seeds we sow, the greater the harvest. Until next time, let's continue to build success, one happy guest and one incredible experience at a time.